24 horrific SpongeBob episodes, 7 levels. I've put together an iceberg full of the scariest, most deranged SpongeBob episodes ever made. We'll start with some of the more unhinged, but not too scary episodes, and then slowly shift into the genuinely disturbing ones. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Sports? Sports begins with SpongeBob and Patrick discovering Sandy's box of sports equipment, but when Squidward sees their confusion about all the gear, he spots an opportunity for cruelty, positioning himself as their teacher. Obviously, he's not going to actually teach them how to play the real games. He's going to make them play some pretty sadistic made-up ones. The first game Squidward introduces is horseshoes, but with one twist. They must throw blindfolded. SpongeBob and Patrick do it without question, hurling horseshoes at each other's faces. When they express concern about missing the target and getting hurt, Squidward introduces a concept that fundamentally warps their understanding of competition. Pain is worth points. This phrase drives how they think about everything, establishing a system where suffering is basically currency. SpongeBob and Patrick's injuries mount with each round, faces swelling and bodies battered, yet they continue playing because the rules demand it. Squidward watches their gradual deterioration with glee, feeding them more dangerous sports. Each sport Squidward introduces becomes progressively more harmful, yet the participants cannot stop because they're trapped in his fabricated scoring system. Eventually, Squidward declares himself the rule giver and later the king of sports, establishing himself as the sole authority over their suffering. His power grows as SpongeBob and Patrick become completely dependent on his approval for validation. The game literally cannot end until someone wins, but Squidward keeps moving the goalposts, ensuring the cycle of damage continues indefinitely. Other Bikini Bottom residents begin watching the spectacle, drawn to witness the total breakdown of those two very annoying individuals. Eventually, Sandy arrives and shuts it all down, but by then the damage is already spread beyond the original participants. The sport has consumed everything around it, creating a community that embraces brutality as entertainment. When Sandy challenges Squidward to a game of basketball to end the madness, she's forced to participate in the very system she's trying to destroy. It's like Squid Game, Bikini Bottom version. Sandy wins, obviously. Patrick's Staycation. Patrick's Staycation starts with Patrick laying exhausted under his rock, complaining that his daily routine of waking up, eating, and sleeping has become too stressful. SpongeBob cheerfully suggests a staycation since Patrick can't afford a real vacation, and eagerly transforms Patrick's rock into a makeshift hotel complete with room service. But nothing can be innocent in Bikini Bottom. Patrick's demands quickly escalate beyond reasonable boundaries. The first red flag appears when Patrick nitpicks the furniture arrangement in his hotel room, forcing SpongeBob to rearrange everything multiple times before deciding the original setup was actually perfect. SpongeBob complies without question, already establishing the harsh power dynamic that will define their relationship throughout the episode. Patrick then demands a diving board for his bathtub pool, and when SpongeBob builds one, Patrick immediately injures himself diving into shallow water. Rather than showing gratitude or concern for the obvious safety hazard, Patrick brushes off his head injury and continues making demands, each one more unreasonable than the last. Patrick goes on to complain about the lack of entertainment during his meal, treating SpongeBob like hired help rather than his best friend. SpongeBob scrambles to please him, but nothing satisfies Patrick's growing appetite for control, eventually leading him to abandon the staycation entirely, breaking into Squidward's house and declaring SpongeBob's efforts a dump. He consumes Squidward's food without permission while SpongeBob desperately tries to maintain the hotel charade at his neighbor's house without Squidward's permission. Honestly, the more horrifying element of this episode isn't even Patrick's selfishness, it's SpongeBob's complete unquestioning submission to increasingly unreasonable demands. When Squidward joins in the manipulation by also treating SpongeBob as a servant, he just accepts this treatment as normal. Patrick eventually invades SpongeBob's own home, claiming his bed and forcing his exhausted friend to sleep elsewhere. SpongeBob ends up at Mr. Krabs' house, apparently a regular thing whenever Patrick commandeers his living space. So yeah, this is not the first time, apparently. Level 2. Funny Pants. Funny Pants opens with Squidward making a simple joke about Mr. Krabs' cheapness. Another day, another nickel. Well, that happens to tickle SpongeBob, and tickle him more. Look, his laughter doesn't stop. It continues relentlessly throughout the day, haunting Squidward's every moment, because SpongeBob physically cannot stop. Slowly, the physical symptoms manifest as SpongeBob's sides begin to hurt, his body showing the first signs of breaking down under the strain of his constant, unrelenting laughter. Squidward, seeing an opportunity, invents a terrifying condition, the laugh box, a vital organ that will burn out if overused. Well, now SpongeBob is terrified and does everything to avoid laughing. He flees from anything even slightly humorous, even burying himself in sand overnight to escape potential triggers, basically entombing himself to avoid his inevitable death. When he emerges the next morning, however, Squidward's totally fake words have become reality. His laugh is gone, replaced by a disturbing, deflating sound. His frantic search for help leads to increasingly disturbing scenarios. Patrick lights a match inside SpongeBob's body, literally setting his insides on fire. Mr. Krabs offers money as a solution, forcing SpongeBob to touch it in a failed attempt to restore his laugh. Sandy provides scientific books that prove useless against this inexplicable condition. None of them work, of course, and without the ability to laugh, SpongeBob's personality disintegrates entirely. He transforms from the embodiment of joy to a creature of pure misery, crying endlessly until his tears flood the entire neighborhood. The episode ends in a hospital where we learn Squidward's laugh box was surgically removed. The doctor described it as tiny, dried out, underused. Just a withered organ extracted from a living being. To make matters worse, SpongeBob's laugh box is partially harvested and transplanted into Squidward without consent, forcing Squidward to carry a piece of SpongeBob inside him forever, laughing with SpongeBob's voice against his will. Stuck in the ringer. SpongeBob's morning routine turns sinister when he slips on a bar of soap, sending him careening into his clothes wringer. The wringer clamps around his body, restricting his movement and compressing his form. He is, quite literally, stuck in the wringer. Patrick arrives, misunderstands the situation completely, and applies forever glue to permanently seal SpongeBob inside the apparatus, turning an accident into a full-on claustrophobic nightmare. The wringer soon becomes an extension of SpongeBob's body, a kind of rigid exoskeleton that prevents normal function. He can't work properly at the Krusty Krab because his arms are totally immobilized. When he attempts to make food, he accidentally squirts condiments into Squidward's eyes, causing them to melt in an unexpected and very disturbing display of body horror. Squidward's eyeballs literally dissolve from his face. Patrick's constant attempts to help only intensify SpongeBob's suffering. At an ice cream parlor, SpongeBob discovers he can't eat. The wringer blocks his esophagus, suggesting he'll eventually waste away from starvation. While he's dealing with this, Patrick obviously eats SpongeBob's ice cream because who cares? He has ice cream. Patrick even takes SpongeBob to a carnival despite his obvious situation. SpongeBob is flung from rides, receiving a black eye and multiple injuries inside the wringer, while Patrick enjoys himself and basically ignores everything going on with SpongeBob. When SpongeBob finally snaps at Patrick, the townspeople turn against him. The crowd condemns the victim rather than the perpetrator, creating serious social isolation on top of his brutal physical confinement. SpongeBob becomes an outcast, punished for expressing legitimate pain. Now SpongeBob sits alone in his house, staring at static on his television, broken both physically and mentally by his ordeal. His body remains imprisoned in the wringer, his social connections severed, and his existence reduced to suffering. Eventually, however, SpongeBob and Patrick discover that their tears are enough to melt the glue, freeing them, until they're trapped again. Whoopsie. SpongeBob's little adventure in the wringer would have been less scary if he had had a channel like this one to watch, so why not subscribe, just in case? Let's go to the next level. Level 3. Bummer Vacation. Bummer Vacation starts with labor inspectors forcing Mr. Krabs to give SpongeBob his first vacation. Unfortunately, SpongeBob is completely unable to function without work, the episode showing him treating basic activities like sleeping and showering as vacation tasks before returning to the Krusty Krab the next morning. But Mr. Krabs kicks him out, explaining that Patrick will serve as his unpaid replacement, setting up the isolation that drives everything that follows. SpongeBob's deterioration happens in stages, each more desperate than the last. He returns as a customer, supposedly just wanting lunch, but immediately starts correcting Patrick's cooking technique when he sees patties stuck to Patrick's stomach. That gets him kicked out. So now he's stuck playing obsessively with his Krusty Krab playset, reenacting his own banishment in an endless loop that hints at his upcoming total break from reality. Even jellyfish collecting becomes impossible when his net transforms into a spatula in his mind, and the clouds start looking like food orders. He gets depressed now. SpongeBob disguises himself as a delivery driver, crawls through telephone lines, and hides in customers' clothing, but Mr. Krabs catches him every time. Eventually, Mr. Krabs drives SpongeBob deep into a forest, tricks him into chasing his spatula, then abandons him completely in an unthinkably cruel last-ditch effort. SpongeBob returns home convinced that Patrick is scheming to steal his job permanently. When Patrick arrives at his rock after work, he finds SpongeBob waiting in the darkness, motionless in shadow, turning to face Patrick with an unsettling smile and saying, "I've been waiting for you, Patrick."
I've been waiting for you, Patrick!
In a voice that sounds nothing like his usual cheerful tone. Just brace yourself for this. The next day, SpongeBob is back cooking at the Krusty Krab in Patrick's skin. Only at the episode's end do we learn Patrick is safe at home watching television, meaning SpongeBob somehow convinced him to surrender his identity willingly, rather than the dark suggestion that he just skinned his bestie. SpongeBob, you're fired. In SpongeBob, You're Fired, Mr. Krabs fires SpongeBob over a single nickel, dismissing his most loyal employee with just 3 words. In Krabs' typical manner, there's no sense of humanity in their relationship. SpongeBob is nothing more than a line item on a balance sheet, but SpongeBob's entire identity is tied up in this job, and without it, he has nothing. Fortunately, many other people want him. The first employer, Mr. Wiener at the Weenie Hut, hires SpongeBob immediately, but fires him just as quickly when he fails to conform to their rigid cooking methods. Pizza Pete follows the same pattern, then Senor Taco, then the Noodle Man. Each one treats SpongeBob as a disposable resource rather than a person with feelings or worth. Each rejection feels increasingly painful because we know how much this means to him. But the real horror begins when these same employers realize SpongeBob's food actually sells. Suddenly, he transforms from a worthless reject to a valuable commodity in their eyes. Unfortunately, they don't want his consent, they just want him. The Weenie Hut manager sends 2 men dressed as hot dogs to literally kidnap SpongeBob, shoving him into a giant bun and dragging him away. They chain him to the hot dog cooker, the manager casually apologizing for the earlier firing, while ordering him to get back to work as though nothing ever happened. Pizza Pete arrives next, pouring tomato sauce over SpongeBob's hands to help him slip free of the chains. Not out of kindness, but to claim him for his own restaurant. The Wet Noodle manager and Senor Taco join the pursuit, each determined to possess SpongeBob for their own profit. They don't see him as a person who deserves basic respect or fair treatment, just a money-making machine to be owned and controlled. I think we can all relate to that one. The employers literally fight over SpongeBob's body, grabbing and pulling at him like he's an object to be divided among them. They chase him through town, each claiming ownership rights to his labor. Eventually, SpongeBob comes back to the destroyed Krusty Krab, with Krabs realizing he desperately needs everybody's favorite fry cook. So, SpongeBob becomes nothing more than a piece of property, his humanity completely erased in their desperate scramble for profits. Capitalism in action. The Krusty Slammer. The Krusty Slammer starts with Plankton vandalizing Bikini Bottom to send a message about Mr. Krabs being a jerk. But when the police arrest him for vandalism, the prison is at max capacity, so they have no choice but to let him go. Mr. Krabs sees an opportunity when the officer mentions they'd pay good money for any place willing to hold extra prisoners. So he totally transforms his restaurant into a makeshift prison, trapping Plankton in a cage right where he's always tried to steal the formula. But Krabs doesn't stop there. When Plankton tries to escape by lying about a penny on the floor, Krabs decides this calls for the hole. SpongeBob becomes the prison, literally, as Plankton gets dropped into one of his body cavities and trapped in complete darkness. Which is wrong on so many levels, I don't even know where to begin. With only his own thoughts to listen to, Plankton starts to lose his mind, becoming more and more deranged until eventually he emerges, visibly broken and mumbling incoherently about the formula being so close he can almost touch it. More prisoners arrive with their sentences, and Krabs turns the Krusty Krab into a full prison operation. He moves Plankton from the hole into a transparent bottle containing the very formula he spent his life trying to steal. Of course, there's a level of psychological torment on Krabs' part. Plankton can see his life's obsession, but can't reach it. Meanwhile, SpongeBob treats the other prisoners like guests, giving them luxury items and mail service. When customers complain about the prison atmosphere and leave, Krabs loses money and finally decides to angrily release all the prisoners. That night, the prisoners return voluntarily purely because they enjoyed SpongeBob's hospitality. When the police officer discovers Krabs released prisoners early, a crime itself, she arrests him. His punishment? Being sent to the chum bucket where Plankton feeds him directly in the mouth, finally getting his revenge through forced feeding at his own restaurant. And chum is not particularly appealing as food, let's be real. SpongeBob Longpants. At the start of SpongeBob Longpants, SpongeBob stands shivering before a movie poster, his knees cold in the ocean breeze, when a traveling salesman appears with a solution: long pants. But when SpongeBob puts them on, something fundamental shifts in how the world perceives him. Patrick walks by and calls him man instead of his usual childish acknowledgement, the first sign that SpongeBob has crossed an invisible line he cannot uncross. At the Krusty Krab, customers stare in amazement at him. Mr. Krabs doesn't even recognize his most loyal employee at first, then immediately promotes him from fry cook to cashier simply because of the pants. Meanwhile, Squidward gets demoted to kitchen duty. So now SpongeBob fumbles with the register, asking about sales and senior discounts that don't even exist. The pants have elevated his perceived status, but he's still just as incompetent as he always is outside of the kitchen. Then, SpongeBob spills ketchup on the fabric during his brief stint as customer greeter. Rather than cleaning it off, he declares himself too good for the Krusty Krab and quits his dream job on the spot. Which is out of character for him, right? But actually, the pants have begun making decisions for him. He floats through town, paying bills with newfound authority, getting a driver's license despite causing massive vehicular damage, simply because the instructor sees the long pants and assumes maturity. SpongeBob lands a job at an upscale restaurant called Fancy, where wealthy fish praise his sophistication. They invite him to an exclusive party, but when he asks to watch the new Mermaid Man movie, they suggest a boring art film instead, leaving him trapped between two worlds, the childish joy he craves and the adult expectations the pants demand. The breaking point comes at the movie theater when the bouncer refuses him entry because long pants are banned from the children's screening. SpongeBob breaks down, begging for his old square pants back, but discovers the horrible truth. The long pants won't come off. They've fused to his body, making his transformation permanent. When Mr. Krabs finds him crying over the situation, he takes drastic action, cutting off SpongeBob's entire legs with the pants still attached. Only then do his original square pants grow back. The real horror of the episode isn't that the pants fused themselves to him, it's that society never accepted SpongeBob at all, just the costume he was wearing. Level 4. Cephalopod Lodge. In Cephalopod Lodge, we learn that Squidward experiences a rare moment of happiness on the third Wednesday of each month. This joy stems from his membership in a secret society exclusively for cephalopods, where he finally finds acceptance among his own kind. When SpongeBob notices Squidward's unusual cheerfulness at the Krusty Krab, he and Patrick decide to follow Squidward to a pyramid-shaped building. They witness Squidward performing a secret tentacle handshake with a guard named Roger before entering. Inside, Squidward joins his fellow cephalopods wearing ceremonial robes and headdresses, but the atmosphere shifts when SpongeBob and Patrick reveal themselves during an initiation ceremony involving a creature called Cantankerous Moray Elias. Their presence violates the Lodge's 1,000-year secrecy, resulting in Squidward's immediate expulsion. Squidward is so devastated about losing his only social connection that it drives SpongeBob and Patrick to create their own club called Feather Friends. They force Squidward to participate in their twisted version of initiation, being stung by a jellyfish on the tongue. Yes, they want to force him to join a club he doesn't want to be in by making him injure himself. The physical pain inflicted on Squidward becomes a disturbing spectacle as he screams and flies high above the sea floor. Desperate to help Squidward regain acceptance, SpongeBob and Patrick devise a plan involving a giant sock disguise. They essentially kidnap Squidward, who questions their sanity with a desperate, "Are you insane?" The plan involves them pretending to be a giant albino eel while Squidward defeats them to appear heroic, and it actually works. Until SpongeBob and Patrick reveal themselves, causing Squidward to be banned once again. Rather than accepting defeat, SpongeBob and Patrick drag Squidward back to their feather friend's lodge, where Patrick pulls out another jellyfish that stings Squidward's tongue again, leaving the episode to end with his agonized screams. So yeah, Squidward lost what he loved, but at least he will be forever trapped in this club he never wanted to be in. Squid Baby. Squid Baby begins with SpongeBob and Patrick playing with baby toys, their childish antics irritating Squidward, who emerges from his relaxing bath in his usual rage. But as he scolds them, Squidward slips on a toy and suffers a severe head injury that causes his brain to swell. Suddenly, Squidward is no longer Squidward. He's a fully grown adult trapped in an infantile mental state. He's an adult with the mind of a baby, drooling and mumbling incoherently. The doctor diagnoses him with head-go-boom-boom-itis, a condition that could become permanent if he suffers any more head trauma. Unfortunately for basically everybody, SpongeBob and Patrick are the ones who will be looking after him. SpongeBob and Patrick's caretaking quickly crosses into disturbing territory as they force-feed him, throw him into the ceiling, and confine him in a cage whenever he attempts to escape. The physical handling of adult Squidward becomes increasingly uncomfortable as they treat him like a plaything rather than a person requiring serious medical attention. Take, for example, their decision to bring him to work. Mr. Krabs, unsurprisingly, shows no concern for Squidward's condition, demanding Squidward perform his duties despite his obvious incapacity. They have to strap him to a high chair at the register with duct tape, where he proceeds to suck on a customer's hand and head, which definitely crosses some lines and breaks some laws. He also draws on customers' faces and soils himself, but is it illegal to poop yourself at work? The episode reaches its peak discomfort when Squidward needs a diaper change. Despite his lack of experience doing so, SpongeBob attempts to change him in various public locations while the customers react with disgust. Horrified that the customers have to watch such a disgusting breach of hygiene, Mr. Krabs steps in, suggesting SpongeBob change him in back where the food is prepared. Fortunately, Squidward does eventually return to normal, but it's not any more comfortable for him. He's wearing a poopy diaper after all. He demands that none of them ever speak of this incident again, clearly traumatized about the fact he was a literal baby for a day. Whirly Brains. Whirly Brains opens on SpongeBob and Patrick discovering a commercial for a new plaything that allows users to detach their brains and fly them around like remote-controlled drones. The mechanism is particularly disturbing, as always. To install the propeller, they must flip their lids, which is to say they must literally open their skulls to expose their brains. The brain extraction process is casual, yet the imagery is profoundly unsettling. Their eyeballs remain attached to their brains as they fly around, creating these weird floating organs that spy on their unsuspecting neighbors. The characters' bodies are now just empty, mindless vessels, stumbling around blindly while their consciousness exists separately, controlled by a remote. Pretty soon, they're invading the privacy of anybody they happen to encounter, their detached brains peeking into Squidward's bathroom while he's bathing, or spying on Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff during an intimate moment. There's no limit and no way to stop them. Eventually, an elderly man captures their brains, effectively imprisoning their consciousness for good. So now, SpongeBob and Patrick's bodies remain alive but mindless, desperately searching for their missing brains. Which, in a way, is just how they live normally, but in this episode, it's not a good thing. They attempt to replace their brains with random objects, including a baby and a soiled diaper. Probably best not to read into that too much. But eventually, after resolving the brain theft situation, Squidward, who witnessed these floating brains, suffers a complete psychological breakdown. He runs naked through town, screaming about an alien invasion before breaking the fourth wall to look directly at viewers with the warning, "You're next."
You're next!
Now, most kids watching this show won't know that this is a reference to a 1956 horror movie.
You're next! You're next! You're next!
Which means they will inevitably just be very afraid that they too will eventually lose their minds in a drone-related incident. It's possible, actually. Rock Bottom. Rock Bottom stands as one of SpongeBob SquarePants' most disturbing episodes, beginning pretty innocently with SpongeBob and Patrick boarding the wrong bus after a day at Glove World. But the journey takes a terrifying turn when their bus plummets down a 90-degree cliff, literally dropping them into the nightmarish realm of Rock Bottom. The atmosphere of Rock Bottom immediately establishes dread due to the fact that it is visually the exact opposite of Bikini Bottom. Darkness envelops everything here, creating an oppressive environment where you can really only see a few feet in front of you. All of the buildings loom with strange, distorted architecture, and even the ground itself seems alive and hostile, like it hates these new intruders. It's like another world, and not a welcoming one. Then come the inhabitants. These creatures resemble deep-sea anglerfish with their glowing appendages and bizarre physical features that mark them as fundamentally different from the more charming and familiar citizens of Bikini Bottom. Their communication consists of normal speech interrupted by raspberries, creating a language barrier that further isolates SpongeBob from this new environment. When Patrick accidentally leaves on a bus, SpongeBob's isolation becomes complete. He is completely alone in a dangerous part of town. Each time SpongeBob attempts to catch a bus home, it arrives precisely when he steps away and departs before he can reach it, creating a pattern of mounting anxiety as his situation grows increasingly hopeless. Eventually, SpongeBob learns the last bus has departed, leaving him stranded until morning in this alien environment. Then he discovers that this was Rock Bottom with the lights on. When the lights shut off, the darkness becomes complete, and the strange noises grow louder and closer. SpongeBob flees in panic toward the cliff, only to encounter a glowing anglerfish, which helps SpongeBob escape using his balloon. The fact that SpongeBob finally makes his way out of this terrifying nowhere town is basically the only bit of comfort we get in this entire episode. Pet Sitter Pat. Pet Sitter Pat opens with SpongeBob receiving an invitation to his grandmother's birthday party, which means he needs someone to watch Gary while he's gone. After Squidward refuses, Patrick eagerly volunteers with the declaration that Gary is safe with me. Well, Patrick drops Gary moments after making this promise. It's arguably the nicest thing he does to Gary this entire episode. Patrick finds SpongeBob's detailed instruction list, but holds it upside down, complaining about SpongeBob's handwriting before crumpling it up entirely and disregarding any advice he's given. This moment foreshadows the complete disregard for Gary's well-being that's about to unfold for the next 10 minutes. Patrick then disappears into the bathroom for what appears to be hours while Gary waits. When Patrick comes out to feed him, Gary watches expectantly as Patrick opens his snail food, only to have Patrick consume it directly in front of him. When a single piece falls on the floor, Patrick won't even allow Gary to eat that morsel. Yeah, he's literally starving the snail he volunteered to take care of. Then he attempts to give Gary a bath, which fails almost as soon as it begins. Believing he should do the opposite, Patrick produces an actual flamethrower and chases Gary with it, claiming he's somehow trying to help with bathing. We should point out that this scene has become notorious among fans as one of the most extreme examples of Patrick's dangerous incompetence. Gary's terror is very, very clear as he flees from what amounts to a weapon of destruction being wielded by someone who literally volunteered to protect him. Throughout these incidents, SpongeBob calls repeatedly to check on Gary, but Patrick consistently misrepresents the situation. While Gary is basically dying, Patrick maintains the facade that everything is fine, despite the house flooding, destroyed furniture, and Gary's increasingly desperate efforts to survive. By the end of the episode, SpongeBob returns to find his house completely destroyed and flooded, yet somehow doesn't notice the obvious signs of catastrophe. Gary appears to have forgiven Patrick entirely, reading him a bedtime story as if nothing traumatic occurred. So I guess Gary's suffering either didn't matter or that the trauma has been completely dismissed. Either way, that's worrying. Level 5. Shell-Shocked. Shell-Shocked begins with SpongeBob investigating strange noises in his home, only to discover his pet snail Gary hiding inside a boot. Trying to get him out, SpongeBob accidentally breaks Gary's protective shell, revealing something truly unsettling beneath. Gary's exposed skin immediately becomes swollen and inflamed. He's not well, and he will only get worse without protection. SpongeBob's desperate attempts to replace the shell with makeshift alternatives like Hawaiian shirts, pants, and space helmets all fail miserably. In a moment of desperation, SpongeBob visits Angry Jack's Shell Emporium, where he clumsily destroys every shell in the store, including one that was optimistically certified as indestructible. Angry Jack's rage culminates in a disturbing demand for payment, but not in money, in body parts. He wants one of SpongeBob's arms and one of his legs as payment, which SpongeBob agrees to, removing limbs, internal organs, and even an eyeball. Sure, he can grow them all back, but geez. By the end of the episode, SpongeBob finds Mr. Krabs digging through trash and offers to work for free for an entire year in exchange for Mr. Krabs' own shell. Something about this feels like a truly horrific sacrifice, as though SpongeBob is sacrificing his life for Gary's salvation. Then Mr. Krabs, ever the opportunist, even demands SpongeBob's health benefits as part of the exchange. The episode concludes with Mr. Krabs, shellless, wrapped in a blanket, now dependent on SpongeBob for shelter, while Gary, wearing Mr. Krabs' shell, locks SpongeBob out of his own home. So yes, this whole episode is one big cycle of suffering where no one truly wins. Each character has lost something fundamental to their being and gained very little from it. Fungus Among Us. Fungus Among Us begins with Gary, as always, seeking breakfast. SpongeBob offers his pet organic, healthy snail food, which Gary obviously rejects immediately. Instead, he spots something more appetizing, a strange green fungus growing on the floor. SpongeBob prevents Gary from eating it and attempts to clean the mysterious growth, but that seemingly minor decision triggers a massive descent into body horror. The fungus sticks to SpongeBob's hand, and when he scratches his head, it transfers to his scalp, immediately kicking off a lot of discomfort for him. Patrick arrives with the worst possible advice: keep scratching until it goes away. But this only spreads the fungus further across SpongeBob's body, causing intense itching that SpongeBob can't control. At the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob tries hiding his condition under his hat and gloves, but the fungus, now dubbed the Ick, continues spreading. When a piece falls onto his nose and won't come off, Squidward notices and panics, immediately calling a SWAT team, who arrive with hazmat specialists that treat SpongeBob like a dangerous specimen, caging him and airlifting him home. But in the process, a piece of the fungus lands on Squidward's head. Unaware of his infection, Squidward touches an elderly customer, transferring the fungus to them and spreading the infection even more. Back at SpongeBob's house, authorities have placed him in a quarantine bubble. Patrick visits and accidentally pops the bubble during a game of pirate wrestling, creating a new, larger bubble for SpongeBob. Meanwhile, Squidward unknowingly contaminates every single Krabby Patty with the fungus, contaminating every person in the restaurant. When Squidward realizes he's infected, the customers become hostile towards him, erupting into chaos just as SpongeBob arrives in his bubble. But the angry mob attacks him too, causing his quarantine bubble to pop and releasing all the concentrated fungus inside, instantly infecting everyone present. The town transforms into a horrific scene of fungus-covered citizens like some kind of zombie apocalypse. The only salvation comes from an unexpected source, Gary, who begins eating the fungus off Mr. Krabs. And as always, that gives Mr. Krabs an idea: charge customers to have Gary clean them. It's one of the most uneasy episodes, but at least Mr. Krabs made a buck, right? Level 6. Krabby Patty Creature Feature. Krabby Patty Creature Feature begins with a major problem for the Krusty Krab. Two hipster fish are demanding something new, something different from the usual Krabby Patty. Mr. Krabs, ever the opportunist, sees dollar signs and drags SpongeBob down to his secret underground laboratory where Sandy Cheeks works as what she calls a molecular gastronomist. Sandy presents her creation, a modified Krabby Patty that she warns is still work in progress. SpongeBob insists that the original formula is already perfect, but Krabs dismisses this concern and orders 200 patties to be made immediately. But the first signs of horror emerge almost instantly after customers consume the new patties. They taste familiar at first, but then suddenly sesame seeds begin sprouting from Mr. Krabs' back before his entire body transforms into a grotesque Krabby Patty creature. The transformation spreads like wildfire as every customer who ate the experimental patties undergoes the same disturbing transformation. The people become living, breathing patty monsters with an insatiable hunger to spread their condition. In fact, these creatures develop a terrifying pattern of force-feeding parts of themselves to uninfected people, creating more monsters. The infected roam Bikini Bottom in search of survivors, creating what news reporter Perch Perkins describes as Krabby Patty Pandemonium.
This is Perch Perkins reporting live from the Krusty Krab, where I am one of 3 people still unaffected by this rabid patty pandemonium.
Even the police are overwhelmed, with one officer dismissively saying he's on break when the emergency call comes in. Okay, so they're not that overwhelmed. SpongeBob becomes the sole survivor after even Plankton and Karen get transformed in the Chum Bucket. In fact, SpongeBob is the one who discovers that Chum, of all things, reverses the transformation. He feeds Chum to each creature, returning them to normal and ending the episode with everyone returning to the Krusty Krab as if nothing happened. The horror completely forgotten in favor of the original recipe. Spongehenge. Spongehenge is one of, if not the most, bizarre and horrific episodes of SpongeBob ever to be aired. The story begins with a powerful wind blowing through Bikini Bottom. When this wind passes through SpongeBob's porous body, it creates an eerie, haunting melody that attracts swarms of jellyfish. But the situation quickly becomes a nightmare as the jellyfish refuse to leave SpongeBob alone, following him everywhere and preventing him from living his normal life. SpongeBob seeks refuge at Patrick's Rock only to be immediately rejected and cast out by his supposed best friend. Abandoned by those closest to him, SpongeBob retreats to a remote cave where the true horror of the episode manifests. Isolated and alone, SpongeBob's mental state visibly deteriorates as he grows a wild, unkempt beard and begins talking to rocks. With the jellyfish still tailing him, he finds an unexpected solution: carving massive stone replicas of himself, arranged in a circle reminiscent of ancient stone monoliths like Stonehenge. These towering, expressionless statues stare blankly as the wind creates that same haunting melody through their stone pores. When SpongeBob finally emerges from his self-imposed exile, he discovers a desolate, empty, abandoned Bikini Bottom. The Krusty Krab lies abandoned and sinking into the sand, suggesting everyone he knew is long gone. His anguished cry echoes across the empty landscape as he realizes how much time has passed. It's not a fake-out either. The final scene is set 3,000 years later. Strange alien beings photograph the stone monuments, now known as Spongehenge, completely unaware of their creator or purpose. As these creatures ponder the mysterious structures, an unsettling laugh, unmistakably SpongeBob's, echoes in the background, suggesting something far more sinister than mere abandonment. The implication is that SpongeBob somehow persisted through millennia, perhaps trapped in some form of conscious immortality while everyone he knew died. That's a lot darker and more existential than SpongeBob has ever been, making it one of the most disturbing episodes ever conceived. Squid's Visit. Squid's Visit pushes SpongeBob's usually naive, childlike personality into something far more disturbing. SpongeBob desperately wants Squidward to visit his home, but his persistence quickly shifts from endearing to concerning as he follows Squidward everywhere, crying and begging relentlessly until he will eventually say yes. But Squidward doesn't say yes, nor will he. With the conventional methods failing, SpongeBob takes Patrick's advice to borrow Squidward's vacuum cleaner, forcing his neighbor to come retrieve it. That's a darker, more calculated manipulation on SpongeBob's part, showing he's willing to scheme and steal to get what he wants. But the true horror reveals itself when Squidward arrives at the pineapple to find SpongeBob has meticulously recreated Squidward's home inside his own. Exactly. As in identical down to microscopic details that no casual observer could possibly know. SpongeBob has replicated the exact chip in Squidward's wall paint, copied his mother's unique stitching style, and recreated all 492 of his self-portraits. This level of detail suggests long-term surveillance and obsession that transcends the limits of a normal, healthy friendship. As Squidward ventures deeper into this psychological nightmare, he discovers SpongeBob knows the precise contents of his medicine cabinet. The bathroom, the furniture placement, even the smallest decorative elements are perfect duplicates. It's not admiration, but the work of someone who has been watching, studying, and documenting every aspect of Squidward's private life. It's stalking. Squidward, desperate to escape, breaks free only to discover his actual house has burned down because he left a casserole in the oven. SpongeBob cheerfully offers to let Squidward stay in the replica house, an offer which doesn't feel so generous, almost as if this is just the inevitable ending of an elaborate plan. The final scene shows Squidward having a complete mental breakdown while SpongeBob smiles, seemingly pleased with the outcome. Squid's visit reframes SpongeBob's typical enthusiasm as something predatory and sinister. His childlike persistence is now stalking, his creativity is invasive, and his friendship is just all about possessive control of another person. It kinda makes you wonder, is SpongeBob a childlike little guy or a psychopath? Are You Happy Now? Are You Happy Now opens at the Krusty Krab, where SpongeBob reads his book of happy memories while Squidward watches with his usual characteristic annoyance. But the moment SpongeBob asks about Squidward's happiest memory, something shifts, because Squidward realizes he doesn't have one. He actually breaks down at his register when he realizes it, crying in front of a customer. Yeah, a real happy episode this is turning out to be. All of SpongeBob's attempts to create happy memories for Squidward fail in increasingly brutal ways. A concert ends with a violin bow striking Squidward in the eye. At the art museum, where Squidward finally experiences genuine joy seeing his sculpture displayed, the art critic Fiasco destroys it with a flamethrower. On a hot air balloon ride, Squidward's fear of heights triggers a crash landing. Squidward just can't have a happy moment. 2 weeks later, Squidward hasn't left his house. He's living in complete isolation while SpongeBob desperately tries to contact him. The show presents Squidward in his bathrobe, unshaven, mumbling phrases like, "Wake me when I'm dead," and "I might as well go to bed for 100 years," so we know he's deep in depression. He wraps himself in blankets, completely withdrawn from the world, ready to give up. Then we get the infamous scenes that made Nickelodeon stop airing the episode. Squidward puts his head in the oven, apparently to remove burnt brownies, but the visual implications are pretty clear. He sets up a rope from his ceiling, supposedly for a birdcage, but again, the imagery suggests something far darker. It's clear that he's at least kinda considering ending it all, and that's pretty shocking for this show. SpongeBob eventually kidnaps the catatonic Squidward and drags him to a surprise party at the Krusty Krab, but instead of guests, SpongeBob has filled the restaurant with papier-mâché copies of himself. Squidward's reaction is explosive, destroying every statue while screaming that he doesn't want a happiest memory. In a twisted final moment, Squidward declares this destruction his happiest memory, finding joy only in obliterating SpongeBob's efforts. Now there's the miserable old octopus we know and love. Level 7. The Night Patty. In The Night Patty, SpongeBob and Patrick stumble out of Glove World after 18 exhausting hours, their feet aching and stomachs growling. The Krusty Krab is right there, but something's different. The lights flicker through the windows, revealing shapes moving inside when the restaurant should be empty. Patrick casually mentions the night shift like it's common knowledge, but SpongeBob is bewildered. Mr. Krabs never mentioned any after-hours operation. They push through the doors into what feels like a dimensional crack. The restaurant has the same layout, but it's populated by creatures that don't belong in daylight Bikini Bottom. Patrick greets everyone by name, somehow knowing these weirdos, but even the cashier isn't Squidward, but Squidabeth, an aquamarine octopus with bouffant hair held by pencils, speaks in a thick southern accent that sounds wrong. Behind the grill stands Barry Blobfish, cooking with ingredients that just shouldn't even exist. When SpongeBob offers to make a regular Krabby Patty, the crowd reacts with horror. They want something more disgusting and unappealing. Then the night manager emerges from the freezer. It's Nosferatu himself, the classic vampire from the 1922 film wearing a Krusty Krab employee hat. He approves SpongeBob's employment by drinking his blood through a straw, which apparently is a job interview now. As part of his job, SpongeBob creates night patties, gray, unnatural versions of his beloved Krabby Patties that somehow satisfy the otherworldly customers. At some point, a fisherman arrives to rob the restaurant, but it's not a crime, it's tradition. The staff explains that he robs them every night as part of the night shift routine. When morning approaches, these creatures vanish as suddenly as they appeared. Mr. Krabs arrives to find SpongeBob alone, insisting that no night shift exists. The French narrator's final words confirm the truth. SpongeBob worked a shift in the tidal zone.
He has worked a shift in the tidal zone.
SpongeBob's version of the Twilight Zone, where reality bends and impossible things become routine. So this whole episode, and arguably this whole section of our video, has been a complete waste of time. Planet of the Jellyfish. Planet of the Jellyfish stands as one of SpongeBob's most unsettling episodes, drawing clear inspiration from the 1956 sci-fi horror classic Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The episode opens kind of deceptively, with SpongeBob and Patrick enjoying a day at Jellyfish Fields. But when Patrick falls asleep near a mysterious cave, he has no idea that inside lurks the Jellian Leader, a grotesque green blob creature that transforms ordinary jellyfish into parasitic aliens with pitch-black eyes and sharp teeth. One of these transformed jellyfish attaches itself to Patrick, who is still asleep. Patrick's eyes turn completely black with small white pupils, and his voice takes on an eerie robotic quality as the Jellians maintain his appearance while completely replacing his consciousness. SpongeBob, oblivious to the danger, catches what he believes is simply a new breed of jellyfish, but the infected Patrick suggests giving these creatures to all their friends, beginning a quiet invasion of Bikini Bottom. One by one, residents are replaced by identical copies with those distinctive black eyes. The Jellian clones speak with mechanical voices and share a bizarre aversion to mayonnaise. The episode isn't scary in the sense that these things are killing or causing havoc. It's horror how they slowly take over society before anyone even knows about it. Their hive mind behavior becomes apparent when the old demand Krabby Patties hold the mayonnaise. There's no more individuality. When SpongeBob discovers his friends cocooned in the Krusty Krab freezer, the horror elements become explicit. The sight of familiar characters suspended in alien pods is genuinely frightening. In fact, the episode terrified many viewers with its combination of body horror, paranoia, and the corruption of familiar, beloved characters. Even years later, fans report feeling disturbed by plush toys with black eyes, seeing in them echoes of the Jellian invasion. It remains one of the scariest episodes to date. Nasty Patty. Nasty Patty drops SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs into an unexpectedly grim scenario when a man claiming to be a health inspector arrives at the Krusty Krab and orders every item on the menu. But it's at exactly that moment when a news report mentions someone impersonating inspectors for free food. Their immediate assumption is that their visitor is fake, and obviously Mr. Krabs cannot stand the idea of someone getting food for free. So, Krabs convinces SpongeBob to create what they call the Nasty Patty. A contaminated burger made with volcano sauce, seahorse radish, and toenail clippings, then dropped in a toilet and dried with gym socks. The deliberate poisoning attempt shows how far they're willing to go based on nothing more than pure unjustified suspicion. The inspector never actually eats their tainted creation, however. A fly enters his mouth, causing him to choke and collapse, but SpongeBob and Krabs watch from the kitchen, believing their plan worked. They're enjoying his apparent suffering when another news report reveals the real imposter has been caught. Oh, shoot. So that means, yep, they just potentially ended an innocent person's life. Obviously, they panic, but instead of seeking help, they choose to cover it all up. They drag the unconscious inspector up a muddy hill in the rain, with SpongeBob obsessively spraying disinfectant while expressing disgust at the corpsey body. Mr. Krabs orders him to dig a grave, and when SpongeBob hits a rock and tosses it aside, it strikes the inspector's head just as he's regaining consciousness, knocking him out again, making their original crime even worse. Police officers arrive at that moment, offering them a ride back to the restaurant, not knowing about the burial attempt. But SpongeBob becomes hysterically nervous while trying to hide the body in the patrol car's trunk, maintaining casual conversation with the officers. At the restaurant, SpongeBob sneaks the body inside wearing a large hat and stores it in the freezer. When an officer requests ice and approaches the freezer, both men completely break down, confessing everything and overlapping accusations and betrayals. They turn on each other instantly, with Mr. Krabs claiming SpongeBob was insane and out of control, while SpongeBob insists it was all Krabs' idea. But the body isn't even there, and against all odds, the inspector, who is alive but disoriented, tells them they passed. I guess that's the real horror. Good lord. If you're still in the mood for more SpongeBob, feel free to check out this iceberg of the most disturbing crime-themed episodes.